In for you.
To the sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun. A mighty sword! Strike while the iron's hot. For Camelot! For Avalon! Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
Happy Sunday, SMITE fans, and welcome back to Phase 3, Week 3, Day 3 of our triple header Sunday in the SPL, brought to us by our good friends over at Prime Gaming. If you don't already have a Prime membership, go ahead and pick one up so you can get the most out of that with free shipping, music, movies, and even more. When you link that to your Twitch account, then you get free games, free content in a lot of those games, as well as a free Twitch Prime sub to your favorite streamer. So if you haven't done all of that, go ahead and pick one of those up today. Thank you so much to Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. Like I said, we are now in Day 3 of our third week in this phase, and it is a lot of good matchups today, and a lot of important matchups for some of these teams as we get ready to move into the World Championship, our roadmap towards Worlds, and all of these teams are playing for that coveted spot to be able to play on the world stage in January, the top 8 teams from all of our leagues. It all starts here with Phase 3's regular season for the SMITE Pro League. Then after that will be the Phase 3 playoffs. That will determine our top 4 teams who will automatically qualify to Worlds. So they'll have from December all the way till January to get some practice of their own. Then we'll take the EU and the NASCC teams and the top 2 of the SOC from both those respective regions on those 2 weeks in December. They'll play against each other. We'll get the top 4 from both, or the top 2 from each of those to make it top 4 total. They'll play with the top 4 in January, that week before Worlds, from the teams that didn't qualify in the SPL. Then we'll take the top 4 from those 8. They'll join the other 4, and that's how we have our SWC. So win games, you get to go to Worlds and play there. Now we can take a look at our schedule and standings for the SPL as of now to get a good look at what you've missed so far this weekend and what you can look forward to today. Oni Warriors found a 2-0 over the Valkyries. Leviathans 2-0 Scarabs on Friday. Yesterday, it was the Dragons and the Kings both finding 2-0s over their opponents. Now we move into today, where we open up with the Olympus Bolts, the Jade Dragons, Solar Scarabs, and Oni Warriors following that. And then we close out our day with the Leviathans and the Kings as our final matchup of the week, our final matchup before we get to move into week number 4. That'll be all the kinds of fun out there. Taking a look at the standings just to see how things have panned out so far. Kings and Dragons standing at the top so far, 4-1 respectively for the 2 of them. Oni Warriors and Leviathans hot on both of their heels, 3-1 respectively. And then rounding out the bottom 4, Tartarus Titans, Olympus Bolts, Valkyries, and Scarabs, who have yet to be able to find a win so far. So for the Scarabs, important matchup for them today to try and get their first win of the phase. Olympus Bolts, though, this is going to be a very tough task for them. And luckily, I've got some help to help me break down the game and move into our day. I got Mifflin joining me over on the desk for the Bolts and the Jade Dragons.
Yeah, I'm back, SMITE fans. Unfortunately, a little bit sniffly, so apologies for that in advance. But I do agree. The Olympus Bolts, I think, have got a huge test ahead of them. This is a really big stepping stone. I know you've already had some roster changes a little bit earlier on in the phase, so having Haddix now move out of the team, have to replace him with Baskin, means you probably do keep your mechanical excellence, but how does that reflect on your shot calling? How does that reflect on your macro game? If we're going to go off the most recent example, hasn't been looking too great for the Bolts. So I want to see whether or not they've been able to rectify some of those issues.
Yeah, it's been a difficult road for the Olympus Bolts, but it's been a pretty nice one for the Jade Dragons. Sure, they lost their really cool win streak, their chance at getting the record in the SPL for most set wins in a row, but at least for now they can tie it with history for the NRG roster way back when. But a lot of talk has really been around this mid lane and the jungle for the Jade Dragons, some of the role swappings that they had done into the past. Haven't seen it ever really since their loss, at least to say there when they were trying throwing Zeus in the mid. That one didn't work out very well. Pagon, though, doesn't matter if he's in the jungle or not, still playing some of these assassin picks. It's been something that has become a staple with the Jade Dragons, as well as a couple of other members of, or a couple of other teams in the league.
Yeah, an in-joke in the SPL and the community at large for the Jade Dragons is, if you want to play on this roster, you have to be capable of playing 3 roles at any given moment. And Pagon certainly is incredibly capable of doing that. Not only is he a phenomenal mid laner, can play those standard mid-mages, but can go into the jungle, or barring that, will take the jungle into mid. I'm talking Susano mid, Gilgamesh mid, things along those lines. He is a rookie this year that has continually impressed, has become a major win condition for this team, at times making heroic plays plays on his own to completely change the faces of these games, and I expect continued greatness from him. But we had the opportunity a little bit earlier this week to sit down with the Jade Dragons, and we had the discussion of, hey, who do you guys want to play through? Seems to change based on the set or depending on whatever they draft going into each individual match. But Pagon has said that, look, when I'm playing well, the team plays around me. They've shown confidence in my ability to really run with a lead, and it shows. And it's crazy to think that this is his first bit of time in the SPL. This is his first year here, and he's already looking so comfortable, finding a multitude of solo kills, has a plethora of gods that he's comfortable playing in every single role, and as well as every single category, be it warrior, assassin, or mage. Pagon's a guy you got to keep your eyes on, man. He really is one of the major win conditions on a, admittedly, 5-win condition team.
And maybe the craziest part to really kind of attest to just how good he has been is all those picks you were talking about earlier, the Susanos, the Gilgamesh. It's not like he waited till like midway of phase 2 or
like
phase
week
3.
1, right?
He was doing that like week number 1, like debut in the SPL, and he was beating other veteran SPL players. I think back to Masters 1 qualifiers when it's the Dragons against the Bolts, and he's solo killing Venenu every single game.
5 times.
Every single time that he has the opportunity to. And speaking of Venenu, that's who his matchup is this time over on the side of the Olympus Bolts. It's been a bit of a struggle for the Bolts, to say the least, in this phase so far. Only able to find a single set win over against the Solar Scarabs, and that one went the full distance to 3. But if there is one thing that the Bolts kind of can look forward to, is that in these matchups, even if they're winning or losing these ones, Venenu has at least been able to kind of keep parity in that mid lane. He hasn't been going 0-4 in his games or 0-8. He's at least been able to maintain a decent KDA through there, kind of keep himself afloat for the team. It's kind of been around Venenu is where it's been falling a little bit apart.
Yeah, I think in losing Haddix, Ven really has had to step up for the squad, become that consistent just paragon of, hey, I'm going to hold my own in lane, I'm going to be huge damage in the late game, let's just wait it out, rally around me. And so far he's done a very good job of that. Things like the Thoth stand out in that regard. Or if he thinks that he needs to be the originator of aggression, even takes a couple of plays from Pagon's book. We've seen the Pele mid have a good deal of success from Ven out of the mid lane. So I think certainly a very adaptable player, and mechanical excellence has never been an issue for the Olympus Bolts at large. The concern now for this team is, how are you adjusting to playing around Baskin? How does this affect your macro play? What is the identity for this team going forward? Because that has been a consistent concern throughout the last couple of years, regardless of whatever the name of this team has been, be it the Olympus Bolts or in the past, the Renegades. The conversation is, what is their identity? What's their win condition? What's that target they're always trying to set up so they can close out these games? And at times they've had it consistently, be that counterpunch team, or at other times they've struggled a little bit to find what they can do to consistently find these dubs. As of right now, I think we're in that struggle period again, but we're coming up on Worlds, and you're really running out of time. I think the Olympus Bolts will find that identity, but they need to find it soon.
Yeah, it's got to come fast because we're already closing out the first half of our phase already, so they're going to have to kind of kick things into high gear. Luckily for us, we got a chance to sit down with Venenu for a pregame interview to kind of pick his thoughts on this week's matchup.
I think versus Valks, our team didn't perform too well. Game 2 was pretty good. We went into the expectation that it's going to be a ramp up, obviously with getting a new player, that being Baskin, he hasn't played in a bit, so he has to kind of get up to speed and everything. Yeah, I mean, we just have some small stuff to work on, small misplays here and there, but once we nail it down, I'm really confident in the team for sure. Changes that I hope to make, I mean, everyone has to be on the same page. We're making really small misplays, but we did VOD review after a Valk set, and we realized kind of where we're struggling the most. So if we fix that, which I think we fixed pretty much in our Leviathan set, just had a few misplays here and there. We messed up game 1 a little bit, where we should have been snowballing. Game 2 was a pretty clean game in my opinion. And then game 3, we should have won, but I didn't get my Mori transform and died. But it's just some small stuff that clean up, and yeah, we should be good. I think Dragons are coming in hot. I think they look really good. They have interesting ideas. They're definitely a hard team to read. I think they're going to stay hot for a while. Probably they might just stay hot through the whole split. I think they're having fun playing with each other and bouncing ideas off each other. Pretty much how Dragons play the map is the biggest thing that we have to watch out for. I think they struggle in some places where they're like weak and stuff like that. We're going to try to change some stuff up and see how it goes. They are obviously a very, very strong team, so we just have to be careful with our positioning and stuff and how they play. They play different than other teams, so yeah, we just have to prep for it this week and be ready for it. The matchup to Dragons, we have struggled before in the past versus them. I think they usually always end up winning versus us in the phase. So it'd be really nice for us, a big motivation for us, obviously, if we can win and beat them and kind of get like the split going. I think we're almost there. We just gotta just stay on track and make sure we're calling each other out and growing from that. And I think we'll be good going into them.
You heard from Venenu, maybe some small mistakes from some of the VOD reviews in their matchups to kind of clean things up. We did see them take at least the Leviathans to a full 3-game set. The second of those in that matchup was one that the Olympus Bolts did win. So it's not like they're getting blown out every single match they're going up against. They are able to at least drag out into these third games. They're able to still stand up against some of the top teams. But I mean, right now, Mifflin, this is probably the hardest team at the top to stand up against is the Jade Dragons, a very dominant early game style of team, but have also been able to transition themselves very nicely once we get past this early mid game. Once we get to the late game, the Jade Dragons MO is kind of the same. We're still going to run it down. We're still running these multi-assassin compositions. They're just going to overwhelm them with force when it comes to these late game team fights.
I'm going to directly quote PBM now because, again, had the opportunity to speak with him a little bit earlier this week. He had said, we're not an early game team. The reason we have that association is because we are so good at SMITE that we don't often get to play the other portions of the game. It's not as if they're trying to avoid the mid to late game. They just don't have opportunities to get to that point, as purported by PBM themselves. So maybe the Jade Dragons do happen to be an early game team because it's the only portion they get to play, but certainly capable of taking it to the late game. Could have fooled me, though, with some of these triple assassin compositions that they have been locking in. I expect to see a lot more of the same from the Jade Dragons until some teams can find consistent answers to this overwhelming aggression, highly volatile dive compositions that the Jade Dragons have been electing to go for. Why not continue to go towards it?
It's been working for them all the way up until now. No point in changing until somebody does force your hand. First bans coming through. Dodgy and Kabrakan up against the Bolts. For the Olympus Bolts, they will take Yamoja off the table, a very standard ban when you are in that second pick slot. Naja added amongst those ranks, who has just been rising up, but also kind of waning in popularity at the same time. There are some teams that highly prioritize this pick. There are other teams that don't even care that this pick even exists out there. It's kind of back and forth. With a name like Scream on the team, you definitely have to keep that one in the back of your mind that he can pick that one up at any given opportunity. Ymir also going to be banned away by the Dragons, so focusing a little bit more so on the front line, trying to keep Awesome Jake down a little bit, and that Dodgy just a standard ban across the board. Hades removed from Fine OK after his recent performance on that. I think he went like 7-1 or 7-2 on that pick. Just recent had it was a 6-0, my mistake. I gave him one extra kill, but also threw a death in that column. And I was wondering if that means that we were going to see a first pick Pele, and that seems to be the call for the Dragons.
Just so much aggression from this Pele. One of the best, hey, I'm going to go in, I'm going to trade out types of picks. Sometimes you get more than one thanks to the AoE nature of her ultimate, but otherwise, so long as you're able to trade out a priority target, Pele has done her job. Originates a lot of aggression on the map, has some flex potential, could go into a multitude of lanes. Generally, we'll see her in either mid or the jungle, so I think that is likely where we're going to see her again today. But I know the topic of conversation, even having not been here for the last couple of weeks, is healers in SMITE right now. How well they play around the Feyblast hoops, how well they can initiate some of these fights, how long some of these engagements have gone around Phoenixes and the Fire Giant. Seems like the Bolts have leaned into that style with a double healer lock-in on the other side. Guan Yu and Terra both make very good usage of those Feyblast. Both are really, really good counter engagement style picks. Terra with that Earthen Fury says, hey, go ahead, try and dive our backline. They're going to get a burst heal regardless and potentially could even turn around that engagement. Guan Yu consistently putting out high healing numbers as well as dropping those HP shields on a very low cooldown thanks to Feyblast. I like this top two from the Bolts, but you're lacking in damage. You're going to have to make that up somewhere else in the draft.
Definitely have to see maybe if that comes from the mid lane. Vulcan's still available, notably, which has become a very popular pick, but has also somewhat fallen by the wayside, at least in this week of games. We haven't seen nearly enough. Who do you think Panda Cat was mean mugging there over there? Who do you think he's pointing at? Is he getting angry at Barra?
Look, Panda Cat's always talking to somebody, right? Sometimes it feels like he's talking to a wall. I don't imagine anyone on the Bolts is going to reciprocate that. So Panda Cat's mean mugging whoever's willing to look at him.
Well, Cernanos comes in. There's some of the damage that you were maybe looking for. Some recent buffs to Cernos has come through. His passive gets a little bit extra cleave damage on that glaive. And then his Bramble Blast got a little bit of extra damage with it, which has made him just popular enough with some players to bring him even over towards the mid-roll. We saw Dardes performing on that pick fairly well. We've also seen him go over into the dual lane once or twice along with that. So a little bit of flexibility with this pick that the Bolts have grabbed for themselves. And then Artio on the opposite side for the Dragons, so now over into the dual lane for PBM, which is, to me, kind of a breath of fresh air seeing Artio back over in the support role. She kind of had her origin story over there whenever she was first coming out, then moved over to solo lane. Now we're kind of seeing her kind of bounce back and forth between the two lanes.
Yeah, breath of fresh air for now, but remember there used to be a meta where it was Artio and support just about every single game. I'm curious now about this composition from the Jade Dragons, though. With a Cthulhu, the conversation is always, are you willing to go towards the Morrigan? If yes, well, no longer if yes, as it's been banned out by the Bolts, but if it were yes, where would that leave the Pele? Probably in the jungle, but now with Morrigan banned out, Pele potentially could go back towards mid. So I like this ban from the Bolts. Giving up a double Cthulhu composition, never fun to play against, but I'm not so certain that it's something the Bolts should have been wary of, considering the nature of their own draft with those top two picks. Terra has a lot of healing, Guan Yu a lot of healing, and double Cthulhu may have a lot of disruption, but you're really lacking in that burst potential to finish off some of these kills, which plays very poorly into a high sustained composition. We talked about CERN slightly, but I think the two primary changes to his kit that really makes him back in the meta is the fact that his ultimate now does damage to minions. Used to be you just drop your ult on wave, they'd hide inside the archers, right? You're trying to take down essentially a pig that's running around in between a couple of minions and you couldn't really deal that damage. No longer the case. And the cripple on Bramble Blast, so disruptive, makes it hard for gods like Cthulhu and Artio to engage in some of these initiations. So I think certainly has got his home in the meta.
Lancelot now locked in for the Olympus Bolts jungler, so Lazar will be piloting this pick for the Bolts. With that Cernos locked in, it does mean that we still have a little bit of ambiguity as to whether that one is going mid or in towards duo. And kind of based off the comp that Bolts have built around, you're saying a little bit of lack of damage from the Guan Yu Terra. Some of that made up in Cernos, some of the early made up for Lancelot. Do you think the Bolts still need a little bit more burst damage in their kit? Maybe throw Cern into duo, get a traditional mage? Or do you think that they can just slot another hunter in here to try and deal with the Cthulhu and the Jade Dragons?
Another hunter, of course, is good against Cthulhu. Anyone that can build kin size and consistently apply that damage to the massive target that's in the middle of the team fight would make it a bit easier to deal with that pick in particular. But what's the exact answer to a Pele in the composition from the Bolts as of now? Are you hoping that Lancelot's going to be able to lock her down? I think your Lancelot probably wants to be performing a similar role, which is dive the other backline. As of now, we don't have a great look at what the backline's going to look like from the Jade Dragons. So to answer the question more simply, yeah, I would like to see some more burst from the Bolts. It's just something that can apply damage from a range a bit more consistently. A standard mage, I'm a massive fan of what that brings to any sort of composition, and as of now, the Bolts are lacking a bit in that regard. Get yourself a standard mage, and I think this draft looks phenomenal, though. We'll see which way they decided to go. Could be you look towards something like a Thoth in this style of draft. You're able to stay a little bit further away from that Cthulhu, apply damage before he transforms, so once he does, it's a little bit easier to deal with. You've got great answers to the Artio. Her initiation's a bit one note. It's either blink stun or dash stun, and either way, evade and punish. If you're playing quickly, can really get you out of that situation for the most part. With Cupid now locked in for the Jade Dragons, though, you got to play a little bit more wary on whatever you want to take towards that role.
Cupid and Merlin both picked up for the Dragons, so a traditional mage for the Dragons mid laner Pagon to play. Gives them some good safety, some decent range. Flicker, a quick escape tool to try and get away from this Terra or
Be
this
sure to
Guan.
grab some brew.
Really?
And a Baron Samedi. Now this is something that Dardes played and said,
Really?
maybe I could have played something else in the mid lane in this regard, but how do you feel about the Baron Mage? I mean, Baron going into the mid role is something that he started with a long time ago, and then people realized, okay, he's a lot better when we throw him over into the solo lane, over into the support role, get him a little bit more tanky, and just get some extra CDR there. But how do you feel about Baron mid in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very curious selection. I would have thought you want something a little bit safer, something that can deal with that Pele dive with a bit more ease. So long as Pele can close gap without having to use her ultimate to initiate, you can always use the Volcanic Eruption to kind of deal with just the root from Baron Samedi. So he's going to have a very, very difficult time self-peeling in this fight. with Guan Yu, Terra, and Lancelot making up the rest of your composition, those three are going to be diving for the most part. Those aren't your standard Peel style of picks. Guan Yu doesn't want to have to use that cavalry charge to stun a Pele off his Baron Samdi. The Terra will drop Earthen Fury to give you that burst heal, but afterwards it's, hey, I need to go root their backline so they can't dive you here. I need to go help out my Guan Yu and make sure that damage has some sort of follow-up. So Baron Samdi to me feels like just, hey, I'm going to be alone in the backline. Please don't dive me. Hopefully my front line's enough to keep you guys at bay. If that's not the case, I'll probably die pretty quickly. Very concerned for this pick. If you decide to go towards something like a Bruiser Baron, become another healer for your team essentially, maybe it can have a bit more ease of play, but just not one that I expected to see up against this draft from the Dragons.
Now for the Olympus bolts here, I mean, we've got Guan Yu, Terra, and Baron, all team healers, also can definitely self-sustain themselves. And then you have a Cernos who will have lifesteal probably built into his kit. Also, probably will build some of the items out there. So, do you think that the Olympus bolts have maybe put too many eggs in the healer basket? And do you think as well at the same time the Jade Dragons have ways of dealing with that amount of healing? I mean, you have a Merlin, so there's some at least maybe good range poke, but do you think there's enough answers from the Dragons to deal with all of this healing?
I mean, Merlin's one of the best suppliers of Divine Ruin in the game. Freudian slip as I bring up that Ankh because I expect to see a couple of them, maybe one or two from the Jade Dragons, because all of the healing from the bolts is inconsequential. It's not as if it's like single target or you could select your target. It's AoE healing from Guan Yu, AoE healing from Terra. Baron Samdi doesn't get to choose who he's healing either. So an Ankh can really ruin some of these team fights for the bolts. Expect to see one from the Dragons. Maybe two, maybe three. I don't know.
Well, let's see what the Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts bring. It's game number 1 between the Dragons, game number 1 with the Bolts, and game 1 with Dulcin.
That's right, Dulcin and Gore on the cast. I think we only got the Dulcin, though.
With Dulcin. No, it's just you now, actually.
Gore?
Have fun. You know what? I bet a lot of people would love that.
I have no. Yesterday, people got their fill. I did SEC, SPL.
I said the
SPL.
same thing.
I think people
I
were
was
done
like,
with me
I've
by the end
cast
of the day
21
yesterday.
of 24 Smite sets
Yeah,
in
you
4 days.
casted a lot of Smite over the
I
course
said,
of this
it
week.
really sucks for anyone who just hates the way I commentate. I'm sorry for those of you out
No,
there.
no, no.
who
We're all
don't.
Gore lovers out here. And I
But
am.
specifically me, because that sentence can imply a lot more.
Right.
I really should rebrand or something.
Oh my goodness, you're right. I've gotten so used to just saying Gore that if I'm talking to people who don't know you or don't know Smite, they're like, Dave, what are you talking about? What in the world? All right, let's get into it, though. First set of this triple header Sunday. It's the Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts with Dulcin, Gore Miser, and, of course, Doug working the camera for us. And, Gore, we saw a lot of this yesterday.
Yeah.
The support invading purple, trying to steal. But as Jake just no, the archers! Oh, my gosh, bro!
Look at Mike yelling at the camera, by the way. I mean, look.
Oh, no, and Panda gets his purple anyway.
That's exactly what I've been kind of waiting for, essentially, with this, right? So Barra still comes off, I think, a little bit better, at least for himself, and the fact that he gets experience. Maybe a little worse off for everybody else on the team. But for him, I was curious the other day about when we were going to stop seeing Hog picked up, because so far it felt like the invades were just I'm going to get you to Hog early,
Right.
ha ha ha.
Right.
And then no one would use it for the next 7 minutes anyway, so you just have a Hog 8 minutes into the game not really being utilized. So it was, when is that being dropped? What's it going to be replaced with? And now we're seeing the multi-potion, health potion start that we used to see, so not something that's necessarily super uncommon. Gives you a lot of sustain as a support in lane. And it's also this predictability about it, right? Like, if I'm Mike here, I'm either going for an invade or I know I'm about to get invaded on.
Right.
So you can set up a ward, or you can do exactly what they did, which was set up to get a kill pressure.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, that's first blood over to Polar Bear Mike. Jake stuck at level 1 on the
Yeah,
Terra.
he's laughing, bro. He's having a good time already.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mike's feeling A-okay. And, you know, often we've actually seen supports. That's actually not the first time we've seen it. I've seen first blood dropped a couple of times on those attempted purple buff invades. And Hurry was talking about it a bit yesterday with me, and just sort of the edge that it gives you, gives your ADC a bit of an experience advantage in the first few levels, in the first few waves in the game. Panda Cat certainly in that area, but remember Barracuda also got a nice XP advantage as well. Panda Cat is going to dash forward. Ankh is down. Hit your autos. Barracuda in to block the auto attacks. Polar Bear Mike took a tower shot or two, but my goodness, Gore. The duo lane for the Olympus Bolts has been pushed back heavily.
And honestly, this is maybe even better for Mike. Like, admittedly, with his mana bar, the multi potion feels like it's almost just because, but he's got both of them ticking, right? So you're going to heal up massive amounts. Your RDO, so you've got your in-kit healing. Admittedly, Jake is going to be able to cap off as well, so it's not going to be the end of the world for the Bolts.
Yeah.
But Mike and Panda and the Dragons like to play aggressive. And now, not having to buy a hog, he's got more healing behind him to be more aggressive. Normally, I don't advise tower shots pre-5 minutes, but sometimes you got to take them.
Sometimes you got to when you want to play the way that Mike likes to play. Plenty of potions still left for awesome Jake, and then, of course, some sustain in that lane as well.
Yeah.
So Jake and Barra should be just fine. Barring jungle gank from either of these two junglers, Lasbra on the Lancelot, Scream on the Pele. Pele's become a real mainstay for this Jade Dragons style of play. All of their compositions seem to have room for a Pele there. It's always blink. It's always aggressive from Scream. And on the flip side, Lasbra has really enjoyed this Lancelot as well. Also gets blink relatively early on. Well, relatively to what? I don't know. Early on. Literally walks out of base with it. It's as early as you can get it. But both Gore, maybe here at level 5, want to utilize that initiation. Maybe have a couple options across the map to do so.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of the blink ult from Pele, and admittedly a little bit behind, right? Still level 4. Meanwhile, Lasbra actually has the ult, so maybe a window of opportunity there to try and capitalize on. I like this positioning.
There you go. It's a blink forward from Jake. Scream caught in the fray, but will ult on out. And the coffin up from Ven does not pull anyone into the party. So Scream forced to ult away. Looks like Panda Cat ulted just a moment ago as well. 3 ults spent by the Olympus Bolts, couple over in mid. But that's, honestly, the proactivity from the Bolts is maybe what's been missing. Remember, this is a team right now in the bottom 3 as far as standings go. And when you're talking about a team, Gore, that in phase 2 of this year had one of the longest win streaks going, I mean, it has been a fall from grace for the Olympus Bolts. I think it's easy to shy away from being proactive and being aggressive when everything's going wrong. You get so nervous to make mistakes. If you're the Bolt, I think you just got to try to stay on top of it. And so I admire all right, we're level 5. We have a slight advantage. Let's see if we can get a kill.
Yeah, that's been I think the fun to try and test for this team. And I had to go and double check it because I had made a tweet about this matchup specifically earlier this week, which is that historically, I think more recently, Bolts Dragons has become a much more even matchup. But you add in like Season 7 and beyond, any matchup essentially with a team that had Barra on it versus a team that had Mike. And it skews Dragon's favor so heavily.
Yeah,
I mean, to the point where I think
right?
at one point they had like 3 times the amount of wins over the Bolts than the Bolts had on them.
Yeah.
But, they have gotten better about it. Last 2, I think 2 direct, maybe just 2 of the 3 of their matchups, the Bolts have actually been able to win. So that has been a very, very big momentum changer, I think, for this matchup historically. And the other thing that's coming into it is that they've never lost 3 in a row. This could change that.
Scream in trouble once again, but again, it is the ultimate out. So we haven't seen the aggressive Pele initiation because it's been disengaged. Mike got first blood. They finally drop. There's life for the party. Ven pulls in Mike, gets the Bolts on the board. And a great rotation in for the 5 members of the Olympus Bolts make their way to the right side of the jungle and snag a kill onto Mike.
Now, from what I understand, and assuming the Scream stays safe here, losing Mike isn't the end of the world. For the Dragons, I think we got to see a lot of that, right? If they're able to pick up a ton after the fact, usually it's going to be worthwhile. This, right now, is not them picking up a ton after the fact. In fact, if they can get a kill even at all, it's just going to be making it even. But as the game goes on, I wouldn't be surprised if Mike kind of plays the quote-unquote sacrificial lamb.
Panda uses Fields of Love. Barracuda waiting for the last couple minions to get in there. Carnanos is kind of taking on. All right, hold on. Hold on. Scream getting dove on again. This time, no ultimate to save ya. Lasbra able to get active. Dashes through Scream. And finally, this Pele has been dealt with. Scream, Gore, it feels like has been low health and running away in the first 7 minutes of this game. The Bolts able to tally 1 more. Now with a numbers advantage, considering a blue buff invade. Polar Bear Mike's got to be careful. Dodges out the walls from Awesome Jake. And a descent into madness from Vine. Okay, should get some value, but you got to get Mike out. And Mike gallops back to the safety of the Tier 2 tower. Still
might
a
be
blue
able to
buff
get
under
something.
threat. Lasbra's low, and it looks like just a blue buff invade and out for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, fine, okay. A little bit more mana maybe can make something happen there. Lasbra is like right on the cusp. Also has some shielding, so it doesn't necessarily end up hurting him either way. That's just good pressure. And like you mentioned the kill on Scream, you roll it back to that moment because the blue buff invade is just capitalizing on even more that the Bolts have been able to kind of dominate over on the right-hand side of the map. And a lot of it has been that we've seen that ult defensively more than we've gotten to see it aggressively, right? We've only seen Scream running away at this point, not being the one who's dictating the plays. And I, very much to you, I like seeing the Bolts do that. Not only because it's proactive, but really it's keeping the Dragons from getting into the rhythm, right? You can't find the beat of the song if Scream's not able to play. He can't do anything here. And so I think that right now we've got 30 seconds till the blink is up, ult is available. Probably 30 seconds that if we don't see pressure on Scream, we're going to see Scream finally find his way back in.
Are you bringing the musical metaphors into the cast because Katie is not as into bagpipes?
I've learned yesterday that I have a very unique niche knowledge base of bagpipe competitions.
Barracuda could be in trouble. Now Mike just going to continue to be a nuisance. Drops the Yonk and heads on out. Here's some aggression from Scream. Awesome Jake already tanky enough that Scream and Pagon unable to combine. Jake blinks forward, walls up, will not come together for a stun. Nothing worth noting, Gore, the blink on Awesome Jake tells you a lot about how this Terra wants to play.
I also think worth noting that Scream, did not use his blink, right? Just goes in with the ult, just tries to get some damage out there. And I love that, mainly because then you still have it for the next time. That ult's going to come back quick enough that you don't really need to worry about it. And so you're keeping them off beat for the Bolts, right? You're just making sure.
More beats, Score.
Well, here's what I'm going to answer. Music's a universal language.
It is.
There's a much better
correct.
answer to that.
You're absolutely correct.
But yeah, no, just like you're making sure that they aren't able to find their success. And now, without the rhythm, you're just able to start tearing them apart. I mean, this was not a very successful lane for the Dragons. Until now.
Yeah, until now. I mean, started off okay for Mike, but it largely stagnated. Barracuda's been under pressure for the last couple of minutes, whether it's Panda just dropping the ultimate to clear the wave. Now it's been Mike and Panda just hanging out around that purple buff. So 2 successful invades worth noting. Mike and Panda Cat invade the red buff just a second ago and then rotate over to the purple buff. This RDO pick for Mike, not something we often see.
Nope.
But I think adds a really good dynamic and a good diversity to the style of play and really pushes forward Mike. You know, he loves to play this aggressive play style, and I think RDO allows him to do that maybe a bit more effectively than some other picks.
I think it's the same merits that we've talked about the front line, like really good CC. You've got a little bit of healing in your kit, really good tanks, like capabilities late game, a little bit of damage that you're able to deal. And we've mentioned that a ton of times for the solo lane and why it was really good over there. Now you just, supplant that into the support role.
What is that damage? Panda Cat, one more auto. No, doesn't get it onto Barracuda, who scurries away. It's the wild hunt that makes the difference. Panda had beads. Elected not to use him there. Barracuda, by the skin of his teeth, able to get on out. And so apparently this lane not feeling great for a Kernanos up against a Cupid. Worth noting, Shadow Steel Shuriken for Panda Cat again, so anti-heal, very important. And the odd crit here or there, very helpful.
And very, very helpful, right? I mean, we're talking about a lane that, yes, they got first blood, but then Mike is getting bodied over in right lane. We come back over to left. Barra has Panda Cat locked under tower.
Under tower, yep.
And then 2 minutes later, Panda Cat and Mike are invading red buffs, invading purple buffs, locking them down under the tower, almost getting kills every step of the way. And a lot of that was finishing that tier 3, right? Like the little bit of crit is helping in the boxing matches. The anti-heal is helping just in general against someone like Kernanos who has built-in lifesteal and that spring form if Bear is electing to use it. So you've got a lot of sustain that you're already countering. Fields of Love is really solid. And like you said, if the beads do get used, which Panda Cat hasn't, you can just ignore the polymorph for the most part, or if you save your dash, you can dash out of it and just still play aggressive.
Mike will not steal away the purple buff, but will avoid the stun yet again. Been very slippery. Jake has thrown up plenty of walls so far this game. Been avoided heavily by the Jade Dragons, and a slight pause by the Olympus Bolts now means a Gold Fury pull for the Jade Dragons at 12 minutes. I mean, still pretty early on in this game without a hefty lead in any lane or the other. Yeah, it would have been a risky commitment there for the Jade Dragons, but they will drop it as the Olympus Bolts made their way on over just to double check, make sure that nothing funky was going on. And so things will stabilize. Jade Dragons find themselves just a bit ahead. What'd you notice?
Look, as you know, we've been talking a lot about anti-heal. And I think the desk mentioned anti-heal. Like, they predicted the Curse Donk, and rightly so, because it was going to be in there. But yeah, Curse Donk for Mike, Shadow Steel, you've got a Divine Ruin, you've got a Brawlers, you've got a Tainted Steel, and a Contagion there for Fine OK. Like, this is a team that saw the amount of healing, saw what they were going to have to deal with, and decided to deal with it the best that they could. And I really like it, right? I love itemization like this just because it's so helpful, right? The amount of anti-heal that you're going to be able to then spread in the middle of a team fight. You know, you're not expecting to hit a lot of people if you're Merlin, but you can hit 2 to 3 with your ability, right? So Divine Ruin and a little bit there. The 2 and or 3 that you don't hit, Scream's going to be able to hit one, Fine OK is going to be in range of the other, and Mike's going to be able to onk all 5 of them usually. And so no matter what, most of the bolts at any given time of a team fight are just going to be lacking in the healing that they've brought up. And you're seeing some similar anti-heal on the other side. You've got the Tainted Steel, you've got a Brawlers, you've got a Divine, but it's not as necessary for the bolts here because you're playing against the Terra, really, right? It's or not the Terra, the Artio. That is the only real source of healing. I guess technically the Cupid Hearts are in there, but most of those are used out of combat. I wouldn't be surprised if Panda Cat, Pagon, PBM, whoever ends up needing those heals, but when Panda Cat throws them out, they just kind of wait out the duration of the debuff, or throw them out fast enough and you get multiple heals off of them. Either way, I think that it's going to be very fun to be able to watch. And yeah, then the health that you're going to get for the Cthulhu, that one's probably going to be pretty helpful from there.
I'll hold my thoughts. Some actual gameplay happening here as the Pyromancer pulled by the bolts and secured by the bolts as well. But Fine OK!
Oh my god!
Fresh back from base. It's got a whole world of hurt for the Olympus Bolts, and it's Pagon tallying the first in this team fight. Pyromancer at what cost? For now, it's your support. Awesome Jake drops. Maybe the Jade Dragons feeling okay. They're able to grab one kill. Olympus Bolts happy that they're able to get the neutral objective on right.
Worth, but to an extent, right?
Well,
and it's always going to be worthwhile. Yeah, well, yeah, it's the stuff after the fact. You're losing at least one tower. It felt like Scream won it a little more. But the other thing is the 2 levels down for Jake. I mean, for someone who was playing so aggressively, who went for the blink, who was helping to lead a lot of that, yeah, and for Bera, that is a massive swing that the Dragons have over the duo lane.
Yeah, you take a deep breath, and then the true worth it or not makes itself appear. The Gold Fury to the Jade Dragons and a Tier 1 tower and a kill. Fine OK. Maybe the trade out doesn't have beads, doesn't have a chance, and Barracuda needed that one. Grabs a level, now only 1 level down to Panda Cat. But again, that still feels pretty good for the Jade Dragons. Gore, a moment ago, 3 minutes ago, I was talking about how even this game is. Now suddenly 4,000 gold in the lead are the Jade Dragons. A team that is so good at forcing one fight in the middle of the game and that being the big pivot point. And it's exactly what's happened here. And at 15, almost 16 minutes in, really starting to pull away with things. Fine OK, despite dying there, had a really nice fight around that Pyromancer. Bolt's got to stabilize here over the next few minutes, or else it's going to be a signature Jade Dragons runaway win.
And you got to think if Lazara isn't Lancelot, essentially, like if he doesn't have the capabilities and the movement that were the disengaged used to get away from that Pyro, there's probably another swing for the Bolts in terms of the kill right there. And you mentioned the 4,000 gold. I'm looking at the 4,000 experience, right? And for some of these roles, it's not manifesting in a ton. But when you're 4,000 up and your solo lane are still down by 2 levels, it means the rest of the team's doing a really good job, right? And Fine OK, and this is the glory of it, the biggest downside of the level deficit that you're going to be experiencing from solo as a Cthulhu versus like a Guan Yu is really going to be late game power spikes in terms of getting your starter upgrade, right? That's really where you're going to be feeling it, is that Baskin's going to hit 20 before you, and that's going to make the big difference for the Tainted Steel upgrade. But otherwise, you're still getting good scaling. You're still really tanky. I like the build so far because it's really going to enable Fine OK to help kind of lead things. And then you've got a level lead in the jungle. Feels great for Scream. And honestly, feels like it's been a quiet Scream game, 0-1-1. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing the resurgence of the Pele. But you've got a level in mid, 2, now 3 technically for Mike over Jake, and then 2 there for Panda Cat. And so just being able to take this experience and ramp it up.
Yeah, you'd think this would be a good fight then for the Jade Dragons. My goodness, Heart Bomb won't finish off Jake, and then back.
Oh my God!
Ven and Bear have turned this fight around. What happened? The Olympus Bolts were reeling at the beginning of this fight, but the duo lane has showed up. The mid lane has done its job. Barracuda with the Aegis stays on the map. Fine, okay, desperately chasing down a kill, is able to do so. But the Olympus Bolts,
They can get more.
they stand up strong. They push back the Jade Dragons.
Panda Cat has enough healing, but Lasbra's in a good spot.
Turn. Lasbra's behind Panda. Panda dashes away.
Heart Bomb
Lasbra out of position, and Panda Cat evens the score. That's all you need, some uptime. The more uptime for this Cupid in these team fights, so strong right now, are both Pagon and Panda Cat. Felt like unable to get involved immediately. That gave the Bolts an initial edge. But the Jade Dragons, they show why they're, or how far ahead they truly are there by the end of that fight.
You know, it brings up to me a couple of things about each of these teams that are just general truths.
Yeah.
Mike will always sacrifice himself if it means Panda Cat or somebody is going to come out ahead. Scream is going to get in there, and sometimes it's going to be better for worse. Those are always going to happen, and sometimes it's going to result in a death. You go 1 for 1, but Lasbra is almost a necessary carry for the Bolts, and when you lose Barra in that fight, it ends up making the favorable trade for the Dragons.
I guess I don't know why I'm surprised that the Fire Giant burnt that fast. You've got a Merlin and a very, very strong Cupid on your team. Again, with time, the true worth it makes itself known to the Jade Dragons. So you get a nice even team fight, rotate over to the Fire Giant, thanks to a staggered death there from Lasbra. 5 members of the Jade Dragons with FG after a quiet start to this game. And an even amount of kills, the objectives, the invades. Think about how much time the Jade Dragons spent in the Olympus Bolts jungle. Just hasn't been much for the Bolts to grab onto here in this game. They only got a couple towers left to defend. Start to look and consider the Olympus Bolts Phoenix defense.
Still really impressed with the FG pool. Not necessarily because of the speed of the burn, but more just kind of trusting themselves. Like the TKO, the 2 they killed with Lasbra and Baragon, knowing as the Dragons that you've got the wiggle room, right? Like, how are they going to get aggressive? They're just now respawning. Like, having that opening and that window of opportunity to be able to jump forward, I think is massive for them. And like you said, you're going to be exposing Phoenixes pretty easily here. You're going to knock them down with a certain degree of difficulty, right? Once it comes to actual Phoenix defenses, I think the Bolts look pretty solid. I mean, you've got Kernanos, nice big wide abilities. Vin's on a genuine mage, so he's going to be able to get some decent damage out there. I think that's something the Dragons are going to have to factor into it. I've been talking about it a lot lately, but like anytime it's like a sub 20-minute Fire Giant, it's like really questionable if you're going to be able to walk away from that FG power play with a Phoenix down on the other side. But you're guaranteed the towers, right? You're going to be able to at least step up to that. You're in enough control right now, I think, as the Dragons, that these last 2 should be pretty easy to knock down. It's just trying to control the team fight. And the way the team fights have been going, look, you've got a Cthulhu. I'm trusting you all the way with it. Again, Scream has the blink, has the ult available. You've got Fields of Love now up for Panda Cat. I think really, really wide opening for the Dragons here to get aggressive under these tier 2s. And you had mentioned it, but with a Merlin, you get to do the same thing that is beneficial for defense, but on offense. Granted, the Bolts don't have to step up into a nice narrow corridor the same way that the Dragons do here.
Right.
But you can really create a field of like just no play zone on either side of the Phoenix, forcing, you know, Barra or Vin or Jake, somebody to play super far back, maybe somebody to play too far forward. It could really open up an opportunity for the Dragons to get a pick.
Panda creates a field of love, while Pagon creating a field of no play. Seems fair from both of the carries. And look, I mean, the ice stance just chunking away at Baskin. Over on the right, the Phoenix, my goodness, where did it go? That was all of the damage from Panda Cat and Scream, and maybe smart from the Olympus Bolts. I mean, with how fast that Phoenix was going to go down, I'm not sure where you find the fight. Here's the worrying thought, though, right? I mean, this game heavily in favor of the Dragons with how far ahead they are.
Yeah.
Should be a 99%er for this team.
With how fast they're destroying structures, they really need to be able to.
But where do you put up your defense? Or can you? My God, Ven evaporates, and the Jade Dragons dash forward and eliminate 2 swiftly.
They might just win.
Now suddenly the game in question. The Fire Giant still 40 seconds remaining on the buff. Fine, okay. waltzes into the Titan room. It's Lasbra hoping to pull one back, finds a dive on a Panda Cat, but Scream's got an answer for his ADC. Baron Baskin, goodbye into the fountain. Panda Cat's on a killing spree, a double kill for the Cupid, a deicide, and a game win for the Jade Dragons.
And look, a lot of that comes down to the way they play, admittedly, the left Phoenix, more than anything. And it's because left Phoenix, they do exactly what I'd highlighted going into it, which is you can either play back, play in the abilities, or you can step up and try to kill Panda Cat. They don't try to step up over there. Panda Cat fires freely from the backline, kills the Phoenix, no problem. Then you go over to mid, and it's like, okay, now you are going to step forward. They erase them from the map. I mean, almost instantly, 2 people were gone. And the minute that you have that one step out of position, that one step away from safety on the bolts, that is just a door kick down from the Dragons, right? You're in a 5v3. You've got Fire Giant for another minute. You've already got an experience lead. You've got a gold lead. The items are in your favor. Run it down. Your worst case scenario is one of your tank dies and you have to back off. Your best case scenario is what they got, right? You just win.
Just win the game. Yeah, I was admittedly surprised. I mean, the Bolts didn't put up a defense at all on the left side Phoenix, and then extend out of their base between the tier 2 and the Phoenix line. That was this very simple dive there for the Jade Dragons. Half of their kills, they had 10 kills. 5 of them were just the deicide at the end of the game. That's methodical from the Jade Dragons. The Bolts' struggles continue, in need of something here. Some momentum against the Jade Dragons in Game 2. Bolts Dragons continues right after this.
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League. The Jade Dragons, in just 22 minutes of play, are able to topple the Olympus Bolts in game number 1. And if you, the fans at home, want to support the Jade Dragons, the Olympus Bolts, or any of your favorite SPL teams, then you can go over to shop.smiteproleague.com. Thanks to our good friends over at Skulls, providing the new jerseys for all of our teams. So if you want to get a fresh and updated jersey for your favorite team out there, make sure to go and pick one of those up now. Again, thank you so much to Skulls for being the merch sponsor in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League and providing those to our players and to our fans over at home. And in game number 1, started out kind of weird, to say the least, Miffla. I mean, we have Awesome Jake getting first-blooded by the minions at the very beginning of the game, then immediately turns around over into the mid lane. Venenu's able to return and get a kill for his team. But from that point onward, I mean, the Olympus Bolts tried pulling these objectives, just weren't being able to really kind of nail down those objectives. Dragons were able to take them away, and now we're looking at a 22-minute game 1 for the Dragons.
Yeah, I mean, I want to break down that Jake play first. Don't play a playa. I mean, that's Mike's thing. You're not going to Mike. But at that, with Terra and Blink, like, that's probably not exactly the God Relic combo you want to be trying to make that style of play on. Otherwise, I do want to point out that the Olympus Bolts were continually trying to make something happen on the map, which has been an issue for this team in the past. It's, hey, we don't really have a plan, so we're just going to solidly wait until someone makes a mistake. This time, it was the Bolts proactively pulling objectives, trying to get Gold Furies, trying to get Pyromancers. They were punished every time, but trying nonetheless, and I think that is a better look than what we've seen from them previously. Otherwise, I talk about the Bolts and I talk about that microplay because there's not much to talk about otherwise, considering the Jade Dragons have simply just continued to do what has worked for them against just about every single team in the league, which is establish dominance, get a lead, and just strangle the map. That's what happens here. They absolutely dominate everywhere they go. Kills may have looked largely even, but if you look anywhere else, Gold, Experience, all the empirical data that we have, that game was incredibly one-sided.
The Jade Dragons did their homework. They looked at the other side of the board and said, all right, well, that's a Guan Yu, that's a Terra, that's a Baron. There's a lot of healing with that composition, and I think it was highlighted perfectly by Gore and the casters. Was within first 2 items of every god, just about every area of anti-heal was covered in that regard to be able to deal with the healing. That's why you see so little across the board, aside from Jake, who gets a lot of it, mostly just from his ultimate there. But I mean, the Jade Dragons just, they answered the call. I mean, that was a question I posed to you. Was there too much healing in the basket for the Bolts? Do the Dragons have enough tools in their kit to be able to deal with all that healing? The answer to that was yes, and they had not just the answer to deal with the healing, but they had plenty of damage to go along with it. Jade Dragons took game number 1. Can they keep up that pace in game number 2? We'll jump in to the picks and bans between the Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts and see what change-ups may need to get made for the Olympus Bolts. But I think you're right to highlight that the Bolts were being proactive. It's something that's been kind of lacking from them in some of their prior sets, where they're not really trying to go for too many objectives, not really trying to really make any waves on the map. So seeing them attempt to do so is at least a good sign for the team.
But that compliment I give of them being willing to make those attempts is twofold in that, yes, I love the idea behind it. We want to get proactive. We want to find something on the map. We want to take away something that Jade Dragons can no longer farm for just free, considering how ahead they were. But secondarily, that Bolts composition, that draft, was not built for that style of play. When you look at a multi-healer composition, the thing that comes to my mind immediately is stagnate the early, get to an objective, elongate the fight, win in a war of attrition. At no point did I see the Bolts make an attempt to try that style of play. It almost felt like every single fight that started ended after that initial start. It was an initiation from the Jade Dragons where they find their pick, the Bolts dig in their heels, and they dig their own grave in that same breath. I would have liked to see them play a bit differently around that composition. Game 2, we got a bit more data on it. Maybe the Bolts will make the adaptations and play on field because the adaptations have yet to come in the draft.
Want to see if the Jade Dragons go for the same top 3. It was Artio and Cthulhu alongside the Pele. We at least get the Artio and the Pele. Will find, okay, go back to the Cthulhu. Yes, he will. So now this is where a Cernanos was picked up by the Olympus Bolts here to round out their top 3. After that is where we saw at least the Baron Somni come through kind of at the tail end there for the Olympus Bolts. And I don't think there's anything wrong with potentially bringing the Cernanos out there. I don't know. I'm just not sold on the Baron, on the Mage Baron just yet. I haven't really been shown that it has a whole lot of merits just yet. It feels like it lacks that extra bit of burst and safety that you could have him if you throw him in a side lane.
I won't echo the complete sentiment. I think that Baron in mid has certainly got value, decent damage output, ranged initiation, in-combat healing, all incredibly good things. There are plenty of mages that are just about DPS and aren't exactly mobile, but the issue with Baron Samdi in mid was, again, the composition from the bolts. You don't have a draft that's built around fighting around your mid laner. It's a draft that was built around diving and utilizing your healing, and up against what the Jade Dragons have got, which is another dive-based composition. They just had an easy target in the Baron Samdi. So now saying that the top three are going to be the exact same for the bolts, I don't think I want to see Baron, but that's not a condemnation of Baron Samdi in mid at large, just with this style of composition. I'd much prefer to see something like the Thoth or just standard ranged artillery damage that can essentially play safe in their own regard. Maybe even a Morgan Le Fay could fit this style of draft, in that what happens when Pele tries to dive onto you? Dragonflight, that unreactable CC. You've got CC immunity built into the kit and plenty of ways to peel for yourself. And if the Jade Dragons decide, okay, well, Morgan Le Fay is a very difficult god to dive, maybe we just look elsewhere, then you've just got a free casting mage. Whereas Baron Samdi was, let's dive that guy, and he doesn't really have any say in the matter.
So now we'll see what changes do get made for the bolts in their bottom two. The Morgan and Cupid banned away from the Jade Dragons, and Jade Dragons themselves will ban Nemesis and Fenrir. Take away some jungle pressure that could come from Lasbra. And with the Naja already taking out the Daji as well, there'll be a swap. So get a little bit of that range damage for Venenu, get a little bit more of that consistent DPS out of him as Merlin gets locked in for the Olympus Bolts mid.
A very defensive mage selection. We always talk about how strong Merlin is on base defense, how good he is at controlling space, one of the best mages in the game at throwing out damage while simultaneously backpedaling, and up against a composition like this from the Jade Dragons, I imagine we'll see a good deal of backpedaling from this Merlin. Artio, Cthulhu, Pele, all gods that essentially can just remove their S key from the keyboard because they only want to move further and further into the fight. Merlin, a great answer. I think one adaptation that I love to see from the Olympus Bolts. Does it fit the exact same dive style of a Guan Yu Terra? Not exactly, but now your Terra can play a little bit more so in their own backline and try and facilitate these two high DPS backliners on the side of the Bolts.
So for the Bolts now, they've got some initiation with the Guan Yu, with the Terra, so they've got ways to get to the enemy backline. They've got some decent healing and sustain in that regard. They've got some decent backline damage with Cernanos and Merlin. Pagon going on to the set is not going to be a fun time for this Merlin in the mid role. So what out of maybe Lasbra would you like to see from the jungle? You know, what kind of picks would you like to see to maybe kind of round out and kind of solidify the composition for the Bolts?
You know, generally I would say something that has got consistent AoE CC, because Terra's stun, sure, consistent, but generally single target. It's not often you're finding multiple people in the clap. Guan Yu's cavalry charge, very easy to avoid getting multi-stun there as well. So the only consistent AoE CC I think the Bolts have got is Cernanos' ultimate, and for the most part, largely avoidable by the CC immunity inherent to individual picks of the Jade Dragons draft. So I mean, it's a cop-out answer and one that's not available right now, but with Lasbra, I would almost say Daji would be the miracle answer, but fortunately for the Jade Dragons and their fans, it's already been dealt with, and it was dealt with expeditiously. Otherwise, take a page out of maybe Captain Twig's book. I think a Hunbots could look pretty good here. Susano, very similar as well with that AoE ultimate, very good at kind of separating these fights and making it a little bit less appetizing for the Jade Dragons to dive into that backline. I like Susano, but the issue with Susano is how strong is that 1v1 going to be when you're trying to navigate the jungle up against things like a Pele, or how easy is it to lock down a Susano when you're playing things like Artio? Incredibly easy, by the way. That cripple field essentially invalidates Susano's kit. Or how likely are you to win a 1v1 up against a set in the late game? It's going to be very difficult for Lasbra to pick his spots with this style of pick.
So for the Jade Dragons, I mean, they can essentially kind of just continue that run-it-down style that they did in game number one. Haven't had to change too much of their picks around. They did have to change their duo lanes, Hunter, and then their mid laner, so their carries with a little bit of swap. But, I mean, you go from Cupid to Medusa. That's a lot of extra early boxing that Medusa maybe gets at least over the Cupid. So for the Jade Dragons, they can keep running it down as early as they need to. Do the Olympus Bolts with this composition have the tools necessary to hold back the Dragons? Is there any pressure maybe in a lane that they can try and play through in the early game to try and get themselves to a later game this time? Because, I mean, that game 1 was only 22 minutes, so it can really only go up from that point for them.
Unfortunately, I'm not looking at this Olympus Bolts drafts and saying, hey, this is the lane that's going to dominate. This is the one you want to originate your pressure through. This feels like to be an Olympus Bolts composition that is built around hunker down, put your shields up, guard up, tighten it, and just say, look, we're going to get through that first 20 minutes. We're going to get to our first Phoenix defense and pray that Terra, Ultimate, and Merlin is enough. And if that's not the case, guard gets blown open, you take one on the chin, and you probably get ended pretty quickly. But if the Olympus Bolts are able to weather the storm for a significant amount of time, maybe 30 minutes, without falling too desperately behind, this Jade Dragons composition does eventually start to fall off comparatively. Whereas the Olympus Bolts, this is a very strong base defense draft. Terra, one of the best counter initiators in the game. Merlin, one of the best at throwing damage out while on the retreat as well. They've got the tools to counterpunch, but I don't think this is a draft that essentially has the tools to be proactive. That's not to say that play on field might not just change the entire pacing of this game. If you're able to establish an early lead, regardless of not having a lane that's going to originate that aggression, you still have the tools to get these neutral objectives.
We'll have to see if the Olympus Bolts can weather the storm and make it to a late game against the Dragons, or are the Dragons going to steamroll through once again? To find out, we got to jump into game number 2, so let's throw it right over to the casters.
That's right, the Jade Dragons on a hot streak, the Olympus Bolts, the opposite. Cold streak, or that's the opposite of a hot streak, by the way. You've learned that here today. My goodness, the Olympus Bolts
Knowledge
need to
is
get
power.
something going. It has not been a good Phase 3 for them so far. Find themselves in the bottom few teams. What'd you say?
I said knowledge is power, but then immediately I thought, we need to get Rach to clip you saying cold streak is the opposite of a hot streak.
Yeah.
And then that the more you know
The more,
screen
the
comes
more
up.
you know right over it.
Well,
You
like
know
with
what,
the
chat?
star, like the boo-doo-doo-doo.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
look, Chad is very on point with that sort of thing. If you talk about a meme or like wanting to make a meme, usually by the end of a cast, it's
Opwash will either make it or Rach will make
right,
it, but
in
it's
my,
gonna get made.
It's in my Twitter notifications by the time the game is over. I will keep my eyes on exactly what happens here because remember, early in these games, the supports have started invading the purple buff. Looks like
I
Jake.
got first blood because of it.
I don't know if you. I mean, all right. So Blink is maximizing our timing here, and only wants the smalls. Mike will also
Mike.
take the smalls, and so we can. Are we gonna auto each other? Yeah, nice, nice. Who won the? Show me player damage if you can. I want to see who won the auto. Oh, Guan Yu. Okay, Mike barely won the player damage battle there.
Yeah.
By about 50 damage over Austin.
All right,
Jake.
so
Appreciate
everyone
you,
who's
Doug, for
about to
being so
make
on
a
point.
player tier list,
Yeah.
remember what just happened.
That's right. Appreciate you, Doug. Always on point. That was a quick turnaround by Doug as well. That's not easy to do. Barracuda hits level 2 first, though. And Panda Cat will eat the stun, but of course Mike separates. We've seen a lot more action in the duo lane as of late than I'm used to. Normally it's jungle gank or bust, but it's been with the kind of unique invade style meta that's been going on. Feels like been more susceptible to kills and early damage than in the past.
Yeah, I think that especially the way that the pressure in duo lane has kind of been built up because, I wouldn't describe either of these as inherently like early game gods, right? But Medusa and Kern both have really good early game. They have really great mid game. And then late game, it's kind of 50-50. I think they've gotten a lot better at it, right? They're still late game hunters no matter what. Mike might be in trouble, though.
Oh, he's getting body blocked. Mike is in trouble. One more auto. And it is a first blood again onto one of the supports, but this time it is Mike overextending for the Interceptor. And I think, yeah, it looks like the Bolts got it anyway. So, first blood and Scepter over to the Olympus Bolts.
And this is even better because if you think about it, compared to last game's first blood, you get it on your carry. So Barra's able to pick it up, feels really good, just period from that. But Barra was already ahead in experience, so now he's got the first blood bounty, plus the experience from that, plus the fact that he was already ahead. I mean, it's level 3 to level 2, but you're going to talk about having the polymorph online a little bit quicker. You're going to talk about being able to have a little more damage out there, better clear than what you're getting out of Panda Cat. For the first 5 levels, that's highly impactful, so really solid for the Bolts to be able to find something like that. And, of course, it keeps Mike shut down a little bit longer, which always feels nice, especially in Artio, who's going to have double the abilities per level than what you're going to get to see out of the Terra.
Well, we're scrapping. for this purple buff. Panda Cat.
block.
Uh-oh, he's dashed on by Barracuda. Beads get used, needed by Panda Cat. Thankfully for the Jade Dragon.
Is that the whole wave?
The entire wave gets leashed into the jungle. That's obnoxious. That's actually super annoying. Barracuda, it's a moving ward. They'll be able to clear it out just fine. But Scream is here. Uh-oh. The moving wards, they actually may pay off. Barracuda has been spotted out. Scream forces the beads away from the Carnanos. It looks like Barracuda will live to fight another day. Lasbra on the Susano. Rotates over to help out with his purple buff defense.
I really like this because you can open up a lot of aggression. If Scream can get hit 5, you get that ult, it opens a completely new world of team fight.
Pagon's here as well.
Yeah, the Dragons, look, and that makes sense to me because when you are losing, you get first blooded, you've lost a lot of experience already, there's a lot of pressure on your purple buff. They did manage to secure their own, although Panda Cat didn't pick it up, and Mike just picked up the one that they stole away. You need a little bit of assistance. They went for a heavy hand to get that assistance, but if you're going to zone out the bolts, you got to zone out the bolts, and you know it's looking for moments like, can it be a kill? Can it result in something? Maybe if Barra doesn't use the beads, they find a kill there, but unless you're going to hit 5, which Scream just now does, you're not talking about too much in terms of kill potential. Stripping away a purple buff, though, it's going to give you a little bit of experience. You just secured your own, and as far as things go, I think helps kind of equalize the duo lane a little bit better.
It's good to deny a little bit of gold and experience. Now, we haven't gotten to talk about the mid lane much yet, if at all, except for the fact that Pagon rotated over. Set for Pagon here, Gore, so no traditional mage for the Jade Dragons. Have some magical damage through Fine OK, through Polar Bear Mike, and so it's not just too heavy into physical by the Dragons by any means. This is the style of game where Pagon kind of flips that switch, you know, or the style of pick rather, where Pagon has the potential to sort of flip the switch. Have seen Jade Dragon's game single-handedly won by Assassin's mid, and Pagon looks so effective. Ven, I think, has got to be on alert here, because once Pagon gets a couple items online, it could be very threatening.
I think it brings an interesting look at the offense-defense conversation for these teams, because if the Dragons fall behind and get pushed back at any point, you're now having to talk about Scream and Pagon go for deep picks and hope for the best, right? But if they get to play on offense the entire game, they're constantly aggressing into the bolts, then I'm looking at Pagon as essentially just being another hyper carry that's available to them, right? Like, you know, Merlin's going to be good for defense. Vin's going to be able to bring that. Good for burn. A lot of the conversation we typically have. Nice wide abilities, similar to what we were saying for Pagon last game. But if you look at the double assassin, it's a high amount of kill potential. Maybe not onto a Merlin who can just flicker away, but catch out Jake in the jungle. Suddenly you're going to be able to have that conversation pretty easily. Things like that, I think, really open it up. If they fall behind, it can definitely end up hurting them towards the late game, right? Relatively squishy target, has to dive deep, has to be melee range. But how often have we seen the Dragons have to get pushed from behind? And honestly, specifically Pagon, right? If anyone's going to be taking the lumps and the team falls behind, it's going to be in order probably Mike, then Scream, then Fine, then Pagon, then Panda Cat. And you know, it'll coin flip as to whether or not a team fight goes their way because of what Pagon's able to do. But if they can keep this, I think it's a little bit of experience lead for Pagon. A little bit, I believe, gold lead over for him as well. It is definitely more helpful for them. Although, Venenu, able to get that wave first, technically levels up to 8 first. So they're kind of neck and neck as far as things go.
And notice Ven win Aegis is his first relic, not beads. So less worried about the CC or potentially lack of CC, but really that insta burst between Scream and Pagon follows him back. A really difficult scenario to stay alive in.
Yeah.
Whereas go ahead.
I was just because the CC on the team, like, what do you like? If you're really worried about not being able to get your flicker off, it's Cripple Field from Mike or the stun from Mike, both of which are like something you can evade pretty easily as a Merlin.
Yeah, you know, and then
because like the long range route, you can just go, oh no,
right?
I'm out of here.
Specifically for the flicker out, Lasbra jumped on. He might learn the power of double assassin, but it's Scream. Turned around on by Venenu, flickers back underneath the tower. And my goodness, a lot of damage happens very quickly there. Unfortunately for Scream, Lasbra just enough HP. And another kill over to the Olympus Bolts. And what a turnaround by Ven. Needed to happen right then, and he was absolutely on point.
Yeah, great kill from Vin. Good knock up from Lasbro. Like, just anything to stop Scream from being able to get that last hit and force the decision of, do you fall back and die, or do you walk forward and die? There wasn't really any other opinion or option for him to try and take there. Scream, I like the way that it starts out because I think it illustrates the exact thing that the Dragons are going for. It is fast burst kills.
Mike, are you in trouble? That's an important petrify from Panda Cat, but none of the stuns
Look at that
connecting.
healing.
Mike does get a double stun. Barracuda low, Mike lower. Mike out of the fight. Panda Cat's gone back in. Body blocks from Jake. Walked around by Panda Cat. The walls clap together, but Mike lives yet again, and Jake actually backpedals, potentially looking for the last bit of damage. What a 1-2 punch by the Jade Dragons duo lane.
And here's the thing. So first off, RDO healing, maybe the MVP of that skirmish, just enough to keep Mike in the fight. But that's not even the one that I want to highlight the most. I want to highlight a change that happened months and months ago. But moving Medusa's anti-heal off the lacerate, off the dash, onto the acid spray, and getting that little bit out there, all of a sudden Jake's healing and any inbuilt healing that Kernanos has to get does not matter. Any potions you pop does not matter. It is just a massive infusion of damage that Panda Cat is able to get out and not have to worry about coming back within any span of time. So you can stay aggressive. You can stay on top of Barra. And even though Jake does a great job with some of the initial body blocks, there's only so much you're going to be able to do. Eventually, Panda Cat's going to try to weave around you and successfully does so. Medusa, the passive as well, being able to side strafe without losing any of that movement penalty. It's so rare to get to see that mechanic like really come into play, but body blocks are like the exact thing that she's good about getting around because of that passive. So really just well played and a perfect choice into this matchup for Panda Cat playing the Medusa.
It looks like Shadow Steel Shuriken for Panda Cat, soon to be as well. So even though slightly different composition for the Olympus Bolt, still enough healing prevalent. And Panda Cat clearly likes this build. I mean, obviously you like it for Shadow Steel anyway, but clearly did enough damage there on the Cupid towards the end of game number 1. Been sort of a weird couple of games now for Barracuda, hasn't it? Where early in game 1, your support gets first blooded, but then it feels like you've got some pressure mounting in lane. And then a couple fights where Barra and Ven kind of make the difference. The comeback fight, that's unlucky. All right, perfect timing by me. Another unfortunate moment for Barra. Purple stolen, petrified down. But no stun onto Barracuda, otherwise Scream likely blink, dashes in.
Oh, 100%.
And Barracuda's in a little bit of trouble. Trebuchet actually may knock down this tower. One more rock and an auto attack or two, and we might actually be tower diving. Barracuda's smart enough that he'll have to dash on away. But it has been sort of a weird couple of games for the Bolts duo lane. They've built momentum, they've lost momentum. Just kind of no man's landy right now where haven't been able to get their footing.
Yeah, a lot of it, and we talk about this a ton with honestly, I feel like it came up with the Valks more than anything. But it's what the Dragons just did is the perfect example, and I'm so happy it happens that way. They don't get a kill, but they get tower, they get pressure, they force Barra and Lasbra and Jake to fall back under the tower. And then what do? They go for the Fury, right? They have the space, they get something after the fact. We saw, admittedly it's difficult with First Blood, but after the kill in mid, which was a good retaliation kill, there's not been a lot of opportunities, and a lot of that's because of the game timer more than anything, for the Bolts to really convert anything that they've done successfully into more success so far.
Bolts need this one. They'll get it. Lasbra
Should be a pyro.
and Awesome Jake immediately jump on top of Scream.
Pull the pyro.
And
pull the pyro. I'm going to keep saying it till they do it. I don't know why they're not.
We're going to Totem of Coup. So we'll get the coup. The Bolts snag a kill onto Scream. Eventually might rotate on over to Pyromancer. But with Baskin headed back towards solo and Jake and Lasbra headed towards mid, looks like Pyromancer will stand a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice because look at the last couple of minutes for the Jade Dragons. Sure that Scream drops a kill there, and so a slight downswing in gold, but appreciate Doug for showing us the gold charts there because Cora, a tower, some invaded buffs, a Gold Fury randomly at 11 minutes. And we've gone from even to just out of control. 3,000 gold at 12 minutes.
Neither of these teams have fantastic secure. So most of these objectives, if it's even footing, even uneven, like 4v5s like it just was, aren't going to feel super secure. But it's, again, just the illustration of how much control they feel they have. The Dragons knocking down a Tier 1 and just pushing people under the Tier 2. No relics were used, nothing crazy. Get the Gold Fury. Bolts don't feel confident in their Pyro.
Uh-oh. Ven's in trouble. Flicker. If it was there, it wasn't used. If it was used, it wasn't used well enough. Ven jumped on by the Jade Dragons. Not much he can do about that. And Gore, the Pyro that still stands, now goes to the Jade Dragons after a kill on a Venenu in mid. Panda Cat has been so effective with these Petrifies so far this game. Couple of slows in the earlier on 2v2 and duo. This one really locks down Ven, and Scream on point as always with the dash in. I mean, it is such an oppressive style of playing Smite that the Jade Dragons play, where a singular kill ends up resulting in so much of this map being taken away.
And, you know, the Dragons, we always give the credit for. I think their early game is really solid. But right now, this game style is reminding me a lot more of the Kings, right? The draft is still very Dragons. The nature of timer is still very Dragons. But the Kings are really good at this exact style of play as well, which is just farming up. And you know, the kills, the Dragons still technically are down in kills when it comes down to it. But that doesn't matter when you're the ones still playing the map better, right? You're the ones who have knocked down a tower. You're the ones who got the Gold Fury and the Pyromancer. And so you're really being able to capitalize on maybe the lack of confidence from the Bolts is honestly what I'm going to contribute that Pyromancer to. I think that was one that with Lasbra alive, even without ult, and specifically Venenu alive, you probably had the burn and the zone capabilities to do that with a Guan Yu and a Terra. I think that they had their opportunities to maybe get aggressive, but the Dragons have retaliated in a way that has made them feel either not confident for it or, even better for the Dragons, in a way that just gets them the objective and keeps them ahead. So it's keeping unfortunately for the Bolts and for Bolts fans that are watching, it's just keeping them locked down. There's not too much you can do in a scenario where you're losing and then you keep losing. You know, if you took some of those fights a little earlier, you'd be in a maybe not like even state, but at least way more favorable than where it's at now.
Yeah, you know,
this lead is getting uncomfortable at this
Yeah,
point.
well, look, I mean, a lot of it is kill timing, right? I mean, a kill early on in the game onto Mike on some really nice body blocks. It was a wonderful kill there for the Bolts duo lane. But that resulting in, like, the Interceptor getting picked up. Now, that's important. Versus, you know, one of the two Jade Dragons kills suddenly meaning a Gold Fury or a Pyromancer or a tower or something like that. You know, the kill timing on the two kills of the Dragons has just been resulted in much better, to your point, Gore, map state versus, you know, an odd kill here or there on Scream or one onto Mike that hasn't then cascaded into map pressure changing. Let's see what the Bolts can get done here as the Tier 1 tower being dove by Mike. Blink in, double stun. And a backpedal just fine. Scream hovering over towards the right. A blink at any moment from the Pele. But Scream won't take the avenue in. Oni Fury back up. That's got to be where the eyes shift too early in the game, you'd think, for a Fire Giant. But all it takes is one from either of these two teams. And suddenly the neutral objective's less guaranteed.
Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if the Dragons force the neutral objective to be the fight, right?
Yeah, just a fight,
Pull
right?
the Fury, force the Bolts into an awkward position. That seems to be what they're going for. If the Dragon's back here, I mean, if you're caught out, you're not in position for this, it's going to be a free Fury for the Bolts.
Final K is back, but Final K has teleport. Uses it to get to the mid-tier 1 tower, but the Oni Fury gets down to beneath half, and the Bolts drop it now. Final K back from base. Freshly spent gold. The Jade Dragons pick up the Oni Fury that was simply reset by the Bolts in disengage. Dragons get this one absolutely for free. Didn't even have to deal half of the damage to the Oni Fury, and Acid Spray confirms it. Now, I guess we're being fair to the Bolts. I mean, if you're not trusting your gold lead or your experience lead to actually win you a team fight at this point, you're not dying. You're not giving up a deicide, a big team fight over an Oni Fury, but testing the response time of the Jade Dragons didn't necessarily work out here. Now Final K baiting in the Olympus Bolts. A nice knock-up. Typhoon flies from Lasbra, connects onto Pagon on his way in mid. And maybe it's the Bolts who have now been baited. None of the tanks being taken down. Final K again
Look at
with
Scream.
massive
Look
knockouts
at
in the
Scream.
back line. Go Scream. A triple kill for Scream. Give it to him. Give him the penta. Scream one away! Scream Penta! 5 M's, 5 kills! Jade Dragons get a DSI!
Look, you're just looking at a team so well played. I mean, they create so much space and the perfect lineup. I mean, I can't think of a character, again, that would be better suited for that exact moment than a Pele. You come in with your ult, you hit those lightning charges, the cone is spreading to the back. I mean, just so well positioned from them. And then being able to turn it into even more, right? And I believe, if you're not including the qualifier tournament, which for just general SPL, I'm not. First competitive Penta that we've gotten to see here in the SPL. Granted, Nika, still credit for that on that best stat, but still.
We nearly got one yesterday. Did you see that yesterday?
Yeah.
And that set was crazy.
We've come so close so often.
It was a quad for layers into a shutdown by BMT. My goodness. You can't write that any better. In the beginning of that fight, Core, think about how much time Fino-K is buying. Like, is anything actually going to happen? It's just the front line buying space.
And a lot of it's CC. Man, it feels awkward because I really want to just watch over it again.
I want to make sure the bolts aren't.
But this feels like it's about to be.
Yeah, I think Fire Giant might get
maybe a
here.
bad scenario for the bolts.
We're going to watch replay that eventually. Maybe.
There's a 4-level difference in the jungle, dude.
I don't know if anyone can hear it. We got so excited I stood up during the Penta and
out.
ripped my headset off my head. So halfway through that call, it probably sounds super wonky because I stepped on the cable and ripped the headset off my head. Man, the Jade Dragons, they are masters at baiting you in, slowing the game down, and then smacking you in the jaw. Scream with a Penta. And the Fire Giant now pulled by the Jade Dragons. This might be the last line of defense for the Olympus Bolts. I'm not sure. Much rest in this game is going in your favor. Double knockup from Fino-K. It might just happen again here. I don't know about a Penta, but the team fight looks very similar. Now it's Pagon on a warpath, and it's Fino-K creating the space into the back. Goes Scream, rushes forward. Scream unstoppable. Pagon double kill. Jade Dragons undeniable. A triple kill for Pagon, multi-kills abound, and Pagon dies to the Phoenix, and he'll get some ribbing from his teammates, but the Jade Dragons unconcerned.
You're in a 4v1. You've got fire minions ready in mid. You should just end this game. What's the last we're going to get? He's level 14, and the lowest in this group is 15 from Mike, and everybody else has 4 to 5 levels on him.
The Olympus Bolts, look, this is a team that was in need of an easier game, and unfortunately when you're in need of an easy set, you don't want to run smack face first into the Jade Dragons. So the respawn's out by the Bolts. So some questions still to be had for the Jade Dragons. All eyes on the Titan. And the Titan might live. It won't. And the Jade Dragons. Mike says, I got it. Don't you worry.
That's exactly what it was, man.
On the back end of a pentakill from Scream, we'll take game 2 and take the set over the Bolts.
You know what? That's my fantasy jungler right there, baby. Let's go!
Are there multipliers
if you're looking at that.
for
I have no idea, but if not, I'm about
be.
to start pushing for it. No, I mean, it's just so well timed. There's so many moments in that one, the pentakill included, that it is something that only comes because they're playing a very specific god in that scenario, right? You get those kind of autos from a Pele, and a deicide at that point in the game, pentakill or not, is going to give you a lot of pressure. If they didn't go for Phoenix, they're going for Fire Giant and getting everything else that's on the map. Instead, they get a Phoenix, they get Fire Minions, they get the Fire Giant anyway, and they get to kick down the door to the Bolts. It was just very good play from the Dragons.
Struggles continue for the Bolts. Celebrations continue for the Jade Dragons. You said first competitive Penta this year outside of the
qualifier.
There you go. Scream's got it in the SPL. First competitive pentakill in the SPL this year, and it's the Jade Dragons. Of course it is. Grabbing the win here over the Olympus Bolts. That's it for Gore and I, and we'll head back to the desk to break this one down.
I guess maybe it is good news for Gore. I think Pentas do get extra points. I think they're like 10 points in the Fantasy League if you manage to get one, which is not something that you get often, but congrats to Gore, congrats to the Jade Dragons, and perhaps I kind of unintentionally caster's cursed the Bolts. We were going into this one, Mifflin, I said it can only get better from here. You know, you lose a 22-minute game, it's hard to win in 22. And then the Dragons go and win in 20 minutes in game number 2. Started out again, decent for the Bolts. Got an early first blood, had some fight, but it was essentially a repeat of that game where they pull an objective, And the Dragons just say, okay, have fun with the objective. We're just going to take it away from you and win. And then scream Penta.
You know, we talked about the boxing analogy at the offset of this desk.
Right.
You know, the Bolts wanted to keep their guard up. Hopefully they don't get it blown open. They got blown open at like minute 1 again, but this is, to extend the boxing analogy, this felt like a super heavyweight fighting a featherweight. This was a complete outclassing. The Olympus Bolts essentially had nothing going for them in this set. The Jade Dragons outpace them, outplay them, outsmart them. It was out anything, okay? And you can put that out there and tell anybody I said it, because really there's nothing to lean on. The Jade Dragons truly today were not tested.
Now the Jade Dragons come out with a dominant 2-game set, and we've got the man who got the pit to kill himself standing by for our post-game interview with Gore.
And honestly, you've done a really good job of making my job pretty easy, because the first question I can just ask you is simple blanket statement. You got a Penta. What's it feel like?
It's awesome. I think that's my first Penta ever in an SPL game, and they happen very rarely. So it's cool. Honestly, I've never seen that before. So yeah.
I know, David mentioned it as you walked in, but like you said that you didn't even like realize what was going on. Like he was like, "Oh, were you worried it was gonna get stolen?" You didn't even notice?
No, I mean, the fight they went on Alec in mid, and I saw the fight was going really well for us, and I was like, Daniel, just go in and force their dashes so I could flank. And then after I killed the 4 people that I like blink ulted all 4 of them, Alec was calling Penta, and I was like, I turned around and Baskin is just right there, and I'm like, don't mind if I do. Don't mind if I do get that.
Sometimes it's just that easy, right? In the middle of the comms, he's setting it up for you. At least somebody was paying attention to make sure that it happens. All of that, it's actually interesting to look at. You guys have had a pretty historically, like the Dragons as a whole, have had a really good matchup against the Bolts. And this is, I believe now, if I'm thinking about it right, the first time since they've branded as the Bolts that they've lost a 3rd set in a row. They started off each game, well, game 1, Jade got first blooded. Game 2, they started off pretty okay. What was it about this one that helped turn it around and I guess keep things in your favor?
Honestly, the early games, they were pretty tame, both games. I think the first game our duo lane really took advantage of them playing solo side. And they killed Bear a few times on his purple buff, which really blew open the game. And then the second game, we just kind of out-macroed them around the map. I think that, I mean, we were up like, what was it, 4K gold, and we're down in kills or something like that, and I just think that our macro game was better today.
Yeah, I think just blanket statement, you could say that. I saw it with all of the amount of gold. We're going to look at it. So this is something I think that is really impressive for you. This feels like it's very Pele-centric, right? Like not any other god that you could have been playing that maybe did that.
Yeah, that's ideal Pele moment right there. I mean, that's why you play Pele over other gods. Like, it's just an amazing moment, honestly. It feels great to do. It's just awesome.
I can see the moment in the replay, by the way, when it has to be the comms of Penta, get the Penta, right? Because like you're just kind of walking along and then turn immediately. It's like, oh, okay, you're going for it. Man, so the way things have been going for your team, right? You guys have been, you went on a really good tear. Take 1 loss to the Warriors so far. Seems like you're starting up a pretty good tear again. What's the future of the Dragons feeling like right now?
It feels good. I mean, we're going for the World Championship, obviously, but I think we still have some things we need to improve on before we get there. So.
I'm excited to watch it. Look, if you're getting pentakills and there's still stuff you need to improve on, I don't want to be the opposing team. But congratulations, man, on the penta, on the win, and of course, I hope you have a good day. Thanks for your time. We're gonna throw it back to the desk though. Close this one out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scream and Gore, for the post-game interview. Feeling good from Scream, feeling good for the Jade Dragons, and that's kind of always something that we hear from them is we still got some stuff to work on. Maybe sometimes a little bit glib with those kinds of remarks out there, because right now the Jade Dragons look nigh unstoppable. So far, only one team since the end of Phase 2 has been able to put a halt to the Jade Dragons. That was the only Warriors, and so far has not stopped since that point. The Jade Dragons on a tear throughout this game. Duo lane, definitely at least where they got the early start for the Olympus Bolts. I mean, Barracuda was able to get a first blood over there, but from that point on, it was all downhill.
Yeah, the Jade Dragons simply just outpaced all the way across the map. Scream broke it down best. They may have been behind in kills at points, but were never down in the match. Golden Experience always favoring the Jade Dragons. You know, J-Mac, what I wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall for the Jade Dragons ride home, man, because we got a very diplomatic Scream right there. You got to believe that Mr. Sprack is going to be talking some mad game, either in the lobby right now, and we're unfortunate enough to be working the desk and not getting the opportunity to hear it, or at least on that ride home, because that is a team that is full of massive, massive personalities that I'm sure we'll have plenty to see on Twitter a little bit later.
Yeah, I can only imagine what some of the tweets are going to be going through later on. But first, competitive pentakill of the official run of the SPL. Again, we did have Nika get his Bastet pentakill early on during the SPL qualifiers, but as of regular season play, our first one, and it goes over to who other but Screams. And I love the call that they made there. 5 M's, 5 kills for the man himself. Give it to him there. So a penta for Scream, a 2-0 win for the Jade Dragons, and a great way to continue their season and continue to prove and at least tell their fans that there's no need to worry. We took our one loss, but we're still the dominant Jade Dragons, as you all know and love.
Yeah, simply a speed bump on the Jade Dragons' journey as they keep their eyes set on that World Championship run. Olympus Bolts fans, this is not a strange situation for them. The Bolts at times have looked like the best team in the league, and at times have looked like middle of the pack. And as of right now, they're still trying to adjust to losing Haddix, who was a primary shot caller for this squad, still adjusting to having Baskin over in that solo lane. I expect strides from this team, and I don't expect them to come slowly. I'm thinking we're going to plateau for a little while, then all of a sudden something's just going to click, and the Olympus Bolts going to be back to that dominant team, that dominant force that we have become accustomed to seeing at various points throughout the year. So as of now, not looking so great, but it could be any given week now where they just come back and they're looking at their previous strength.
All it takes is for that one little thing to click for the Olympus Bolts to be able to bring themselves back up and start making their climb over towards the middle, or even potentially up towards the top of the pack there. But let's take a look at the schedule and the standings to see what we still have today, because that was only set number 1 of our 3 sets today. Jade Dragons find the 2-0 over the Olympus Bolts. Our next matchup will be the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors. Solar Scarabs trying to find their first set win of the phase, have come close a couple of times, but have just been slightly out of reach. Oni Warriors trying to remain at the top of the pack themselves. They're sitting in the top 3 along with the Dragons and the Kings. Kings will be playing the Leviathans to round out our day, who are also trying to break themselves now maybe into the top 3. 3-1s for both the Warriors and the Leviathans, 5-1 for the Dragons, 4-1 for the Camelot Kings. So some potential standing shakeups depending on how this next matchup goes. The Oni Warriors can find a big win, and if the Leviathans can find one, we could see a little bit of a change-up as far as where the Camelot Kings stand in their regards.
Yeah, I'm keeping my eyes on the Oni Warriors as of now. Not only are they hot on the heels of the Camelot Kings, but if you guys have been paying attention to the media days where we sit down with the pros, the Camelot Kings support player, Genetics, had some choice words for the Oni Warriors duo lane and entire team as a whole, saying that maybe they're not a team that you really need to be concerned about. Oni Warriors, when I talked to them about it, said, hey, we're not concerned about that. We're concerned about one thing and one thing only, and it's continually improving and getting ready to make our vie for that World Championship spot. And so far, they've been looking pretty good this phase. Hopefully for themselves and the fans of the Oni Warriors, they can keep up that pace. A good test for them today.
It's going to be a good one for the Oni Warriors. Can they find a win against the Solar Scarabs? Can the Scarabs find their first win of the phase? All that and more coming up right after this break.